In today's lesson, we'll be learning how standard and factored form can give us clues about a quadratic relation. If you recall, the shape of a quadratic relation is called a parabola. A quadratic relation can take on three different forms. It can take on standard form, vertex form, and factored form. We are mainly going to focus on standard form and factored form. In our first example, we want to determine if the quadratic relation is in standard form or factored form. Like I mentioned before, we are not going to focus on vertex form at all. As a quick reminder, a quadratic relation in standard form does not contain any brackets, which would mean that is in standard form and this is in standard form. Another quick reminder is that a quadratic relation in factored form contains two sets of brackets, which would make this factored form and this factored form as well. In our second example, we've been given a quadratic relation which has been graphed, and we've also been given its equation. Let's do a few things before we begin. This equation is in standard form. Remember, standard form does not contain any brackets usually. Next, we're going to take a look at the quadratic relation. We can see that right over here, we have something called the y-intercept. The y-intercept happens to be -2. You'll notice that there are no x-intercepts. If you analyze the equation of this quadratic relation as well as the value of the y-intercept, you'll see something interesting. You'll see that this -2 and this -2 are identical. So there's a little bit of a pattern here. This last number here tells you what the y-intercept is. So if you've been given the equation in standard form, you might be able to match it to its graph using that last number. In our third example, we've been given a quadratic relation as well as its equation. If you recall, this equation is in standard form. The giveaway is that there are no brackets in this equation. Once we do that, let's analyze the quadratic relation. Over here, we can see that there is a y-intercept, and the y-intercept has a value of +4. Again, you'll see a little bit of a pattern here. This 4 matches up with this +4. And as established in our previous example, this last number tells us what the y-intercept is. Therefore, if we're just given the equation of a parabola, we could possibly match it to its graph, just using that last number. In our fourth example, we've been given a quadratic relation as well as its equation. If you recall, this equation is in factored form. The giveaway here is the two sets of brackets. Next, we're going to analyze the quadratic relation. Over here, we have a y-intercept value of -6. And up here, we have our x-intercepts. So I have an x-intercept value of +1, and I have a x-intercept value of -3. And you'll notice a pattern. You'll notice that this number is similar to that number, and this number is similar to that number. However, they are not identical. But they do give you a very good idea of what the x-intercepts are. There is a method of converting these numbers to the x-intercepts, and that will be explained in a later video. However, at this point, all you need to know is that there's a relationship between the numbers that I've circled, as well as the x-intercepts. In our last example, we've been given a quadratic relation as well as its equation. If you recall, this equation is in factored form. The giveaway here is that there are two sets of brackets. Next, we're going to identify the y-intercept, which is right over here, and the y-intercept is positive 2. Next, we're going to look at the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts here are positive 2, as well as negative 2. At this point, you should notice some sort of similarity between the values of our x-intercepts as well as these values. Again, all you need to know right now is that there is some sort of relationship between the numbers in the brackets as well as the values of the x-intercepts. In summary, we took a close look at standard form as well as factored form. We did not really take a look at vertex form, so I want you to ignore that for now. We concluded that the last number in standard form told us the y-intercept of the parabola, whereas these values in factored form were related to the x-intercepts. Therefore, it is quite easy to match an equation to its graph using these patterns.